Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May 17th, 2018 Downtown Design Review Committee meeting. First order of business, as always, please ensure that your cell phones are either off or in the silent mode, and then we'll begin with roll call.
Corey Bates.
Present.
Nathaniel Harding.
Present.
Charles Ainsworth.
Present.
Anthony Black.
Present.
Julie Kriegel. Deborah Richards. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I assume the committee's had a chance to review the minutes from last meeting. Do we have a motion on those minutes?
Move approval. Second.
That was Harding and Blatt. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Minutes are approved. We have no cases withdrawn. We have no continuance requests. And then moving on to the consent docket, I believe Laura.
Staff requests that DTCA 18, let me get that right. Yes, 1839 be pulled. We've had an issue come up, so we're going to need to separate it out to take action.
Okay, so item 5B will be moved to the front of cases for individual consideration. And that leaves item 5A on the consent docket. Does anyone have any discussion on the consent docket, or is there a motion?
I'll move to approve item A on the consent docket. Second.
That was Blatt and Harding. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Consent docket is approved. So moving into cases for individual consideration, we'll start with the first item that was pulled from the consent docket, 1146 North Broadway Drive. And I'll have staff.
The reason staff had to pull this one is one of the art pieces, which is number 2 on the list, the mural, has not gotten a recommendation from the Arts Commission yet. It's actually had to go back to the Arts Commission. It'll be next month. So we need to continue the mural, item number 2, to the June meeting. There are no issues with item 1, 3, or 4.
Okay, so on 1146 North Broadway Drive, the item that staff is recommending continuing is item 2, and items 1, 3, and 4 can be voted on and
That's
approved if the motion is made in that direction. Does anyone have any comments or discussion on this item, including the gallery? Do we have a motion?
Man, everybody's asleep up here today. Okay, I move to approve items 1, 3, and 4. Do I need to make 2 motions, or can I do 1? And continue item 2 until the June meeting.
Second.
So that was a Ainsworth Harding motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So items 1, 3, and 4 are approved, and item 2 has been continued to the June meeting.
Thank you.
So moving into section 6, cases for individual consideration, as shown on the agenda. Item 6A, 616 Northwest 5th Street. Is the applicant present?
Yes, he is.
If you could come forward, and staff will introduce the project, the application.
As you can tell from the case number, this item came before you guys almost a couple of years ago, and most recently you had a revision dealing with the pergola. And at that time, the pergola was proposed to be located adjacent to the fence. And one of the conditions of your approval of that was that there would be a vertical piece that extended from the top of the pergola down to the top of the fence to help with noise. Subsequent to that, revision was administratively approved by staff to move the pergola so that it's centrally located So since it's no longer located adjacent to the fence, one of the items that for consideration today is the applicant would like to not to have to put that vertical piece. And I was going to discuss them one at a time. You can see where it's located. They could still put that vertical piece. It would look kind of strange since it wouldn't actually go down to anything. The other item that they requested was, part of the original approval of this one was that they could not use the south, I call it the south yard area, which is between the Airstream trailer and the alley, and they had to block it off. And so they also submitted a request that restriction be removed as well. So I've got some pictures included so you can kind of see how everything looks. If you haven't been by there, you can see the eastern edge of the pergola, and the fence is off to the right here. This is the southern yard area adjacent to the alley. This is the barrier that they installed that's on the north side of that area. And then this is looking back to the north. You can see the edge of the pergola in relationship to where the fence is located. This is the western edge of that pergola. It's kind of centered now on the Airstream. And then across, we have some residential. You recently approved a multifamily project that's going to the south across the alley that has not started yet. And then to the east, we have a new single-family residential, and you've heard from that owner in the past, and he actually is here today. And then there is a commercial building that's been renovated, and the upper story is residential as well. So the applicant is here to speak to this.
Morning.
Morning, thank you. Obviously, we've been here a couple times on this.
For the record, could you just state your name?
Yes, Lee Morris.
Thank you.
The owner of the Union. When we originally came before you was to get approval for the pergola to be against that fence, in which at the time we were told we could be within 2 feet of the fence, which was great for us because there's a doorway that comes out of the building. We thought we could be able to cover that so people wouldn't get wet if it was raining, what have you. So we went, and you guys approved that with a 2-foot hang down, which was to help the noise factor by going to the fence line. Obviously, we went to the building, get the building permit, and we were told no, can't do that. Something in the building code that they tried to, or are saying that it would be a building, and if it was within 2 feet of the property line, would actually have to be an enclosed wall. So that would just be terrible. Just not what we're trying to do. And so after talking with the fire marshal, talking with the water engineers, and everybody, it was just reluctantly, I agreed that we should just move it in the center of the patio. So that's what we did, and they said we would be fine by doing that. Obviously, the pending area option on there was we still have the 2-foot hang down that's still in question, and at this time, it makes absolutely no sense aesthetically or to provide the purpose that it was intended for of causing any sound barrier. And even talking with some of the residents in the area, they have agreed or thought that, yes, it has helped the noise just by having the pergola itself. It has muffled it down. So we're requesting that get taken down or not have to be put up. Again, it serves no purpose that we can see.
Did you want to go ahead and address the other part of your request?
Yes. As I also go through the rest of this, I've had lots of conversation with the neighbors, and we have all agreed that it would be in the best interest of the neighborhood to shelf the back area project at this time. In other words, just leave it alone, and we will revisit it at another time. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't be able to use it. We have noise ordinances and all kinds of things set up, but I'm trying to be a good neighbor. I want to fit in with the neighborhood. I don't want to be a burden to them. Some of the things we've done to change is we are now a full-on restaurant. We've been closed for almost 6 months, remodeling, changing what we are, who we're trying to, our targeted customers. We have changed our hours from staying open until 2 o'clock in the morning, which it was before. Now we're open 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to midnight on Friday and Saturday, and 11 to 9 on Sunday. So the noise, that was all done with the wanting to be part of the neighborhood and don't want to have anybody have loud noise later on at night. So that's what we've done to try to help to be part of the neighborhood.
So just to clarify, you're still requesting item number 1, which is to eliminate the 2-foot hang down from the pergola, but you're withdrawing your request for item number 2?
Correct.
Okay.
Or we were checking on how it should procedurally be done.
Oh, yeah.
accomplished. So yes, just withdrawing item number 2 is fine.
Okay.
So the committee doesn't have to take action on part number 2.
So if someone were to make a motion, should they be specific that that motion relates to item 1?
Yes.
Appreciate, is it time for feedback now from the board?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Appreciate you coming back and kind of explaining, the evolution of dealing with the neighborhood and trying to be a good neighbor.
Yes.
It sounds like, I'm in favor of moving this ahead, but I didn't know if there's anybody else that wanted to speak on it or any of the residents that wanted to speak on it as well.
I believe we
Appreciate
do
what you're
have
doing.
somebody here who wants to speak.
Okay.
As far as the technical aspect of it, pretty straightforward. I don't have any questions as far as the design aspect.
Okay. I would request the option to come back, and if I need to rebuttal something, I would love the option to be able to do that.
I believe that's always open.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Morning.
Morning. Brett Price, 511 North Dewey. Just really want to echo some of the things Lee said. He has been great to work with. We reached out to him when we got the notice, went over, he gave us the new tour. Quite honestly, we'd eaten there before. We went over, but he has been very respectful of the neighborhood, and he is doing a good job of turning it into, I think, what is better suited for the neighborhood. I didn't see anything in there as far as, he kind of talked about why he couldn't take the pergola over. Obviously, Lee's not, like the rest of us, we haven't memorized the code and why you can't do that. I think it's advantageous to him and to us, to everybody, really to carry that over. I don't know if there's a workaround or something we can talk to the city about how to get that to go all the way over. Obviously, it's more shaded area for him. It shields his customers coming inside and outside, and obviously for the neighborhood, it further dampens the noise. So I didn't see, like I said, I didn't see anything in there, as far as code or why it was not allowed or if there was a workaround.
It's my understanding, it is allowed, just the original purpose of it was to form like a continuous barrier with the fence. That's what I remember.
Well,
And since it's no longer adjacent to the fence.
the issue was they were going to have to put in a firewall at that location. They actually went to the Board of, whatever, the Building Code, Board of Variance,
Board of Appeal.
Board of Appeals, and they were denied because they were hoping that they could still put the pergola where it was supposed to go and not have to put that fire-rated wall there. And at that point, that's when they decided, well, we're just going to move it over because they really didn't want to have to put a firewall there at the property line. So I'm sorry, I didn't include all that because that's kind of not within our scope of things.
Sure. No, I was curious. And I agree. I mean, there's no reason to have it hang down there that doesn't really serve us a purpose. I mean, obviously, it was supposed to come to the fence, and that helps buffer the noise even further. And I do appreciate him, meeting with us and agreeing to take out that back area for the time being, and we'll continue to work through that going forward. And as I told him, we want him to be successful. We want to be, good neighbors to everybody. It doesn't do any good for any of us for him not to be successful. So that is the goal, and we appreciate the open dialogue he has created going forward. Great, thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the gallery that would like to speak to this? Well, I'll echo Nathaniel's comment on an appreciation for neighbors getting together and really working together to find a solution that works for everyone. It's refreshing. Do we have any other comments, discussion, questions?
I agree that a 2-foot hang down probably is not going to reduce the noise at all. But I'm curious, the last comment, is there then a concern that they should try and put up a wall? Are there potential businesses or houses that might be placed here in the future?
The lot next door is vacant.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's just, I know there's a requirement if you're within so many feet of the property line, the firewall requirements kick in, and
Yeah.
that's, even though this was an open, pergola or carport type structure, they were treating it literally as though it was an enclosed building.
All right. Well, I guess if the neighborhood feels okay with it, there's no rule that they have to enclose their backyard, so.
There's a 8-foot fence, side yard fence.
Yeah.
Yes.
But as far as noise, because there's lots of holes in that fence. Yes.
I could see that being a slippery slope
Yeah.
as far as how far that enclosure goes then.
Yes. Okay.
I'll move to approve the application on the basis it complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referred in Section C of the staff report. And I assume since he took out the item 2 that we can just approve it as it's now reflected.
Okay.
Okay.
So that was a Harding-Ainsworth motion. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? So item A1 is approved.
Thank you.
So moving on to the next application for individual consideration, item 6B, 314 Northeast 3rd Street. Is the applicant present? And we'll have staff introduce the application.
This is a request to build a single-family home in an area that we haven't really seen a lot of that activity in a while. In doing the research, because I couldn't figure out why there are all of these, they're like 50-foot wide strips that are running through Deep Deuce, and back in the mid-'80s, DOT condemned property for stormwater purposes, so now they've started selling those off, which explains why a few of these are starting to come in. In this particular case, there's 2 25-foot adjacent lots. The westernmost lot, however, cannot be built on with a structure because there actually is a storm sewer structure in ground. So they're limited by the deed to what they could use that for, and they could actually put concrete to park on, but they can't build a structure on it. So that's why you have the house is totally on the eastern lot, 20-foot wide. So there is an existing sidewalk that's referenced, and it's stamped to look like brick. They're going to have to take that out. This tree right here, which I'm surprised is still there because it's right near the storm sewer structure. So it's probably beneficial that really needs to come out. And there was 2 large structures on either side, and then down at the end of the street is a couple of single-family structures that have been on the market for a while that everybody has been watching. So this will be like the only new construction in the near future on this street. There we go. So the driveway curb cut obviously is new at that location, and they're wanting to put some flat concrete adjacent so that they could have parking up the side. Right now, if you go out there, there is a lot of on-street parking, given all the residential units and all those multi-story buildings that are around there. And so this surface parking is on the side of the lot where all they can do is concrete. So the issues that we discussed, which are our guideline issues, you've seen in a couple of different locations. Most recently, dealing with curb cuts, sidewalks, and front entrance garages. We had a case, and in this particular case, there is no alley. They have no place else to actually enter their property, so their only curb cut can be from Northeast 3rd Street. Because of the width of the structure and the garage that they have, their main entrance is going to be on the side, and so we discussed the guideline we have about entrances on the street. And so this is the street-facing side with the garage, and this is the elevation where the main entrance is going to be. And in discussing with them, what we've done is they've agreed they're going to put lights on either side of that entrance, a canopy over the top to help identify it and draw people's attention to it to know where to enter it. The eastern facade, as you see, is the one that's going to be next to the existing building, so obviously there's nothing other than that door. And then the back has balconies and then the rooftop deck. So you can see right in here is where they've agreed to put a canopy over that to try to draw attention to be inviting to the people who might be walking that are wanting to head there. Right at this location is where that door is. So
if I could just clarify one item. Talking about the sides of the site and where areas where building a building is allowed versus just the pavement. So as they've cited this, that is in line with what's allowable?
per the deed restrictions, which aren't the city's deed restrictions, but yes, the edge of, the western edge of the house is on that property line. And so to the west of there, per their agreement with the deed, that can be the flat concrete.
Okay, so from the west facade of the building to the west property line, they're not allowed to build building?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I can just introduce myself,
Sure.
I'm Tara Martinelli, it's my husband Regan, and we bought the property on January 2nd. We really like the downtown area. We moved here from Tampa, Florida. I recently retired from the military, and so we really just wanted to build a house downtown. I want to personally thank Laura, because this is the first time we've ever built a house, and she has really walked us through the process. So thank you, Laura, I appreciate that. We have gone to ODOT and talked to them about the property and what we are allowed and not allowed to do. The deed does state that I believe it's lot 7 and 8. On lot 8, we are not allowed to build anything. There is an 8-foot wide sewer drain underneath there. And the deed does say that you can put cement and you can landscape, but you cannot build any structure over top. So this is what we have come up with. We also talked to the fire marshals downtown, and we're 5 feet off the building next door on the east side to ensure that we don't need a firewall or a fire suppression system. And the fire marshal has said, yes, you are in compliance with that.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on?
No, I'm just here to answer any questions that you guys have.
Okay. Do we have any questions for either staff or the applicant?
I would like to make a comment that on previous applications, I've been opposed to garages facing the street, and I would like to say that this lot, does have a significant kind of issue and restraint to it. So I can see why it could be allowed in the situation. There is no back entrance. I do think that it is possible to have a garage not on the street, but it would totally kind of distort the ground floor in a kind of non-usable way. So
I'd like to touch on, if I could, the curb cut and really that existing tree that's there. Kind of sad to hear that tree is getting removed. It's a well-grown tree, and when you stand on the street there, there's a nice continuity of the treescape down the sidewalk. A 30-foot wide curb cut, in my opinion, is wider than it needs to be. I do believe that there's some maneuvering that could happen in front of the building and around the building that would allow you to reduce the width of that curb cut and still access the building.
So we've already reduced the curb cut from 32 to 30, based on what Laura told us is the requirement from the city. It can be no more than 30. One of the reasons is 30 is to make sure that we have the driveway up to the garage and that we can provide ourselves a little bit of extra parking on the side. So car is 8 feet wide, and that gives us 2 extra feet to walk around the cars if we can pull a car up on the side of the house.
Right. I understand that it's been laid out to give you straight line direct access to,
Right.
I guess, 3 lanes almost, 2 into the garage and then 1 up the side. And what I'm discussing right now is reducing that curb cut even more. Yes, it will no longer allow you to drive straight into each one of those 3 lanes, but there's certainly room to maneuver once you pass that curb cut to the lane that you want to enter.
Okay.
If that
Is
makes
that because you want to keep the tree, or?
One reason is that potentially could allow that tree to remain and maintain the treescape on the street. And 2, just for pedestrians walking in front of the house, to reduce the distance that they're walking across where they could intersect with vehicle circulation.
Okay. And just so you know, that tree is actually pulling up the concrete there right now. So if we're allowed to take the tree down, we will be able to straighten that sidewalk and fix the sidewalk that's there. Because the tree's getting so big that the roots are popping up the concrete. So we would fix that.
Do we have any other?
where is the tree on the, I don't see the tree on the site. Is it on the site plan? Can we see where, if it was reduced, do we get,
I believe that the tree is in the vicinity of where there's a jog in the sidewalk,
So
because
it's
if I
not-
go back to the pictures, and it's hard to see, the sun was really bright, you can see the jog in the sidewalk there.
Can you point to it
Yeah, so if you go to this area,
Yeah.
you can see where it kind of jogs right there. So I believe
see.
we'll just stick my hand right there, and I'm going to say that it's roughly in that location based on the jog in the sidewalk.
So if you look to the dotted line that goes all the way down, that is the sewer easement right there, this dotted line there. So the tree is right next to that sewer easement as well.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Corey that, especially since we have to have a garage door facing the street, to create interest and, movement along that street, that keeping the tree would be desirable, and also provide more safety. In my general opinion, the city should probably build utilities around the natural landscape, not make way for utilities because of the natural landscape. So I would be a proponent of creating more visual interest in street activity based on the fact that we have a nice streetscape with amenities.
But you were proposing a new tree.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, we would,
Okay.
I'm sorry, my name's Regan. We would plant a new tree. Obviously, it's not going to be as old as the one that's there, but certainly we're wanting to plant a new tree just to make the right-of-way or the easement more functional. So.
And it's listed, it says install street tree, but we hadn't actually located it yet, because I initially thought, well, if we're going to install a new one, we need to stay away from the storm sewer, so we need to try and put it on the east side, but there's not a lot of room there, and so it might be healthier for the tree if we could get it, a new one, over on the west side, where there potentially is more area for it.
Well, and in my opinion, it's a win-win to reduce the curb cut, and maybe it makes more sense to pull the curb cut in on the west side, because you're, I assume, using the lane around the side of the house less than you'd be using the garage. It's an assumption on my part. But, reducing the curb cut from the west side and pulling that out may give you a little bit more room to plant the tree close to where it is right now.
Okay. The other option might be that if I can, if I'm able to keep the tree, if you guys really want us to keep the tree and keep the 30 feet that I have, would that be negotiable? Because that tree is really more towards the west. So we might be able to keep the tree or put new trees there and keep the 30 feet.
If I can comment real quick, I drove by there yesterday. It's a beautiful street. The trees are lovely, and I can see why you want to be there. But I do like the idea of a tree, whether it's the existing one or the other one, kind of blocking the vision of that concrete pad, because that concrete pad is going to look out of place there. And so if the existing tree isn't maybe a good solution to keep there and you plant another one, I'm fine with that. But I understand what he's saying about reducing the curb cut. I think there's a lot of good reasons to consider that. I really don't think it's going to hamper your ability to go in and out too much. And like I said, I think it's going to be a better view from the street.
Yeah, we can do that. So what would be the maximum curb cut that you guys would prefer?
Would we?
We're at 30 feet now.
So we would, I think the process that would be in place is specific to that item, that would come back to staff's approval, for staff's approval. But in my opinion, I would reduce it as much as possible, still allowing for a car to maneuver around the house to get to that lane. I would think in the 24-foot range would be ideal to reduce the amount of curb cut that there is on the street.
Okay. Well, I mean, I will have to take it back to an architect and look at it.
So this, is there any other comments?
I've got just one question, and you can tell me that this was vetted, but was there any consideration for the garage to be at the rear of the house with a very narrow drive down the far west side of the property?
Consider putting the garage door on the side. There's two issues there. One is that the garage's length then would only be 18 feet. And if you want to park a large truck, or you buy a large truck or something like that, it would not fit in the garage. The other issue is that when talking to an architect, that you really need 30 feet on the side of the house to pull out. Turning radius-wise. And we're only 25, and I did not want to put the building on the side at risk at all.
I was thinking more of total rear entry. And I'm asking for something that I realize adds an additional amount of paving to this overall and reduces your backyard potential. But if you were driving on the far west side of the property line, and you were driving down a narrow 10 to 12 foot, and then you would have a large grass area adjacent to your house, basically a side yard, but you could come in and your pad could be done to where you could, at the very least, 3-point get into a garage of the depth that you want. So, and then your front door could engage the street. You would have daylight coming into your living room from the north side, or to your entryway. I was just curious if that was investigated, because it would also allow you to drive out onto the street in the forward position, which would help us with some of the concerns that we've previously brought up with respect to pedestrian engagement with your car. So I was just curious if that was investigated to actually have the driveway enter with the car facing north.
Well, there's another easement in the back of the property. There is a 20-foot alley easement in the back.
So you would displace your floor plan to where your garage would go to the south side, and the entire floor plan would shift north. So there would be no difference in your setback. It would only be paving. Your paving would increase because you'd have paving on the south side of your house for that turn in. But what you would lose in rear yard, you would gain in side yard, because now the 25-foot lot would have the 10-foot paved on the far west side, and then your front would have a 10-foot wide curb cut, and it would be mainly just driveway, and it wouldn't be driveway plus garage. I'm just curious, was that investigated?
That was looked into and discussed here, but it would, I know that you're saying that we could move the yard to the side of the house, but on both sides of the, it would take away from some of the privacy on the, next to the, both buildings on both sides, because both of them have windows, and we're planning, on the fence line, we're trying to put, for, not only for our sake, but for our neighbors, trying to at least add some privacy to both of us. And if we move it to the side, then we will be, I guess, could be, bothering some of our neighbors. So we wanted to keep it more towards the back. Additionally, for the house itself, it's going to take away from the enjoyment of the house on the back side. So we won't be able to go off the back porch from the bottom.
I understand that. That would be the one thing that you would give up, is the grade level onto the back. I was mainly curious if it was investigated.
Yeah, we did look into it. In fact, on all, I mean, we've done several things, or we've kind of messed with the architecture to try and move that. It was considered, so for those reasons, we said it would be better to keep it in the front.
So procedurally, if we were to move this ahead, but with the amended curb cut, would we just say that in our motion, or to take it back to staff?
Yeah, yes, I would just condition it that the driveway width would be reduced and brought back to staff for final approval. And if somebody could articulate where we landed on the tree.
I think we're going to remove the tree as long as...
Some of these old trees, I live in Heritage Hills, and we've got a lot of old trees down there. There's some good trees, some bad trees. But when they start popping sidewalks up and getting too big for the site, then, I love to keep trees, but if they would plant something that staff would approve, I'd be all for that. I congratulate you guys for what you're doing. I think it's really cool, and I think we ought to kind of help them out here a little bit.
Maybe when they come back to staff, they can show a certain size of tree, too, that they put in, if they're replacing it. It's not just really tiny.
More than just the 2-inch.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'll I'll kind of double back on my previous comments. I was saying that without being fully aware that you were planting another tree in its place. So I think in the end, having a tree there is ideal for the streetscape long-term. Is there anyone in the gallery that would like to speak to this? Any other comments or discussions? Otherwise, we'd be looking for a motion.
Your turn, Chuck. I move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the amending the curb cut and to come back to staff to consider a curb cut more on par with 24 feet and to have a suitable tree that staff is also to approve. How'd I do, Lisa?
So that was Harding Ainsworth motion. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I
Appreciate you guys working with us. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6C, 616 Northwest Broadway. Is the applicant present? Good. Yes?
This is a new building on a vacant lot. It's currently a parking lot at 6th and Broadway and Automobile Alley. It would be immediately west of the big red parking garage on 5th Street, so between 5th and 6th. We've worked back and forth with the applicant to pick up a variety of things that we think improved the streetscape, and they've eliminated some curb cuts, which is really helpful. The building is brick and glass for the most part. It's flat facades, massive. I think it fits in with all of the guidelines. The only issue that we brought up in the staff report was the design decision about having a rear entrance for the employees. So most of the employees are going to park in the parking garage, and for them to have like just a short path, which is, makes a lot of sense. We wish we had that at our office building. And some people try to create it. It's not designed to do that. Some people try to create it. So that makes a lot of sense. The concern was if that is removing too much, inadvertently removing too much activity from the street. In the end, I felt that people are still going to be circulating on the street for coffee, for lunch, for dinner. But I did want the committee to consider that part, and I know Mr. Burnett
Hi.
has more to say about it.
Good morning. My name is Andy Burnett. We're the developer of the project. I'm going to let Rand do the majority of the talking, I hope. Just wanted to introduce the project. We've been working on this for about 8 months. It's a big international company. We'll be relocating their corporate headquarters, North American headquarters, to the site, bringing hundreds of new jobs. We looked all over the city trying to find a good landing spot. They wanted to be in the downtown core. One of the problems we had was parking, trying to find affordable, reasonable parking. And so we settled on this site because of the YMCA garage that was behind the lot. And it was a big 550-spot parking garage that was virtually vacant. So that's how we landed here. We've tried to design the building to be a good neighbor, to fit in with the rest of the architecture. But we also needed a big building. We needed to be able to house hundreds of employees. And so it was a balance that I think Rand and his team did a good job. So with that, if you have any questions for me, I'll hand it to Rand.
Can you disclose the company?
I can't.
Okay.
We're close.
Figured it's worth asking.
Yeah.
Can we make our approval conditional on that?
Cannot.
Good morning. My name is Rand Elliott. I'm president of Elliott & Associates Architects. Thank you very much. I wanted to start by saying thanks for your service to Oklahoma City. I know it takes a lot of time on your part to review these projects, but you're influence and inspiration is very important to the benefits of making Oklahoma City a better place. It's been a real honor to work on Andy's team. He's a real professional and has had very important and thoughtful ideas about how this building would contribute to Automobile Alley and the betterment of Oklahoma City. I thought what I would do, other than and in addition to the things that you saw in the DERC presentation packet, I thought it might be interesting to provide one bit of information that's a historic reference that I think could help to understand why the building is what it is. You're seeing some existing photographs, obviously, of Automobile Alley, and we've been really inspired by the quality and the context of the neighborhood itself. What's particularly important that you'll notice is, with all historic buildings, and especially Automobile Alley, it's really about the proportion and scale of the windows and the columnar quality of the facades themselves. And so in starting this project, we felt like that because we are living in 2018 and beyond, that we needed to do a building that both looked backward and looked forward, and the opportunity to find the spirit of the neighborhood and incorporate that thinking into a final solution. So there's a slide that comes up. Cody will bring that up for us. I could ask or answer any questions here very quickly with the site. Broadway is on the left. Obviously, Fifth Street is on the lower section, the alleys to the right, and the parking garage is to the lower right of this image. And Lisa had mentioned this notion about an entry point. Right now, the existing parking garage stair actually occurs at the corner where the cursor is, and we wanted to make it as convenient as possible for hundreds of people to be able to access the building. And so the building really has an access point on the east side as well as a main entrance on the west side. The idea is that it's a transparent lobby, so the ability to look all the way through it and realize that there's a relationship both on Broadway as well as to the parking structure. The existing site looks like this. This is our schematic demolition plan and how this all might come about. The current conceptual first floor plan acknowledges the possibility in the future of there being retail or restaurant on the ground level, which is the gray L shape on the left-hand side. And then the white area has been designated, at least for the moment, to be amenities for the tenant itself. And so the idea is that those two things would live together. And you can also see the location of the lobby and the access both to Broadway, which is the primary location, as well as the back door, if you will, or the employee entrance on the east. This is the subject or the thought I wanted to share with you that makes this particular solution unique, and I want to give you a little bit of a history about this. The success of this building is really about the scale and the proportion of the forms. And as we studied those things that are a part of the Automobile Alley history, this becomes very important. This is called the golden ratio, and the mathematics are at the top that show how the idea of beginning with a square, making a radius, that radius becomes another part of another square and continues on in this particular form. It's called the golden ratio. And the golden ratio has been used since eons. Plato first used this or discussed this in 428 BC. Euclid discussed this in 365 BC. And it is a proportional mathematical formula. And it is the number 1 to 1.618, and it goes off into infinity in terms of the proportion and so forth. It was used by Leonardo Fibonacci as well as Leonardo da Vinci in basically assessing a mathematical formula and a proportion and scale that would render something the most beautiful. And that's what the golden ratio is all about. And so you can see it here applied to an ancient Greek temple, and you can see the position. And so if you had the number 1 on the left-hand side of the graphic above, then the number that would be on the top side would be 1.6. And it's a proportional scale, and it has been used, for all of history. And it is an amazing thing and really renders a quite beautiful proportion and scale. And so we felt like that this would be the very best thing that we could do to introduce a building that included this, that had its inspiration from the proportion and scale of the buildings and window enclosures in particular in Automobile Alley. So we launch into the elevation drawings, and I won't spend a whole lot of time with this, so we can go on to the 3Ds, but gives you a little bit of an idea about the scale and proportion. The grid is there. The small grid, which is basically on the north end of the building, really references Automobile Alley and the scale of those facades. And then on the larger grid, you can see here to the left, that references downtown. And so it's really about the scale change as this is a site of transition between Automobile Alley and downtown itself. On the west elevation, you can see that transition of the smaller grid on the left-hand side that then transitions into the larger grid as it moves towards downtown. So this is our proposed concept, and the materials are inspired by those buildings in context very near the building. This is a section of Automobile Alley where there's a lot of limestone, which is really wonderful. The Oklahoma building, the Buick building, the Markham building, the Fifth Street lofts, and so forth. And so in this particular instance, we were trying to find this condition where we could make a really nice gesture about Automobile Alley, which is mostly brick, and then this transition into downtown. And so we've chosen to propose the use of a masonry unit, a modular masonry unit, that would have the same color and texture as the limestone in the adjacent context and buildings. As you can see, it moves around the corner. The trolley will pass by. The focus on the element on the upper corner is a reference to this particular company and a really nice sort of entry or gateway gesture into Automobile Alley. It's the south elevation. And then as you go down Fifth Street, which is one way going to the east, you get a sense of the building turns. It is 60 feet deep, and part of the reason why the building is 60 feet deep is that this allows massive amounts of natural light to penetrate the building from both sides. We found that this is an ideal dimension to be able to allow that and get natural light to penetrate literally to the interior sections of the building itself. So it's an L-shaped building, 60 feet deep. On the east side of the building, rather than having a back per se, we felt like that it needed, because it's going to be so visible, it needed to have an architectural quality as well. You can see the parking garage on the left, and then the access as the entryway is there in that particular area. This particular client wanted the ability to have some outdoor space, and so by positioning it on the east side of the building, it allows late afternoon shade beginning at about noon or something, and so this becomes a lovely outdoor space. There's a proposal to do a basketball court or a garden or something like that that makes this a very pleasant space for customers and employees alike to use it. The element cantilevered from the east facade is a conference room, and it is intended to really celebrate the big skies that we have in Oklahoma City. Be a great place to see the state capitol, for example, and other things, and so it would be one of the executive conference rooms. This is an image that we did that shows how we would handle the location where the transformers and all of the mechanical equipment for the building, except for the rooftop units perhaps, would be, in essence, screened. And so we're proposing to do it with Dents, Nellie, Stevens, and then we need gates as well. This will also be where the dumpsters would be. There was discussions about how does this entrance feel, and so we've added benches that allows someone to sit and watch a basketball game if they want to. It has natural light associated with it, and so forth, so that it really becomes a pleasant place for all the employees for this building to actually hang out. One of the things that we felt was really important was the context of Automobile Alley is such an important thing in our community and has been in process since 1995. And the idea was that we would propose to do this ring, and that for all of you who know Automobile Alley, you know that the circular medallions at each of the intersections is there to make reference to historical artifact. And the fact is that Broadway is 100 feet wide because it was the street that the city designated as the one where you could turn a team of horses around 360 degrees. And that's why Broadway is the size that it is and why the medallions are reminiscent of that period. So in an effort to allow this building to integrate into Automobile Alley, we propose to do this LED ring that gives reference to the same medallion that's in the street intersection. Northwest corner, You can begin to see the main entrance to the building. One of the things that is important using city standards is to make sure that the main entrance is identifiable and understandable, and it's, we've created a canopy, if you will, at the main entrance to create a very clear understanding of where the main entrance is. A view looking, obviously, south into downtown. And then up close, the idea was to make this very pleasing. Andy Burnett is a real fan of lots of trees, and so we're putting trees all along at a very close but understandable and recognizable dimension along Broadway. And the intention here is to show how it touches the ground, the columnar qualities, the glass, and so forth. And then we have included the canopies that are reminiscent of other canopies that are in the automobile alley area. Next. Gives you a little bit better sense of the street. You can see the trolley line here, which will come right by. The stop is actually at Red Prime, just at 4th Street, roughly. Main entrance, and you can see the transparency of being able to see all the way through the building, so it's not a building that sort of ends with a black hole. It ends up being a transparent thing, so you can actually see the sunlight all the way through the building. And then some dust shots. We feel like that Automobile Alley has really become a special place, especially at holiday, when we have the holiday lights on Automobile Alley, and we felt like that the building lighted in some way could be really quite wonderful and add to the energy of the neighborhood. I think safety is very important for downtown workers these days in any location, and so lighted entry points, pleasant spaces where employees can linger after hours and so forth was taken into account here. This could be a lovely place for an afternoon party or discussion or the opportunity for families to interact with one another. Ground level views. We have a very tight corner right here and actually chose to leave the corner open as opposed to putting canopies at the corner itself in an effort to make that more open and convivial. It's likely to be a retail or restaurant tenant, and so we really wanted it to be a very special sort of magnet at this location. We're as conscious about what goes on the roof because we know that there will be buildings in the downtown core looking down onto the roof of this building, and we're proposing to make it as clean as we possibly can. Mechanical units and so forth placed in positions that would be screened from below. Gives you a little bit of an idea of the east outdoor space. And then some examples of the materials that were proposed. The field brick, again, would be a light gray brick that would be reminiscent of the limestone. The dark gray is really intended to be because we've got a slight site change, to suggest infill, if you will. Mechanical equipment screen would be an ACM or metal laminate product of some sort. And then we have infill panels on the east side that are a little different than the glass on the west side. We would use an architectural metal panel in those locations. And then the canopy on the right just gives you a little bit of an idea of the spirit of other things that are in the downtown area. Landscaping, really important. The London plane tree, often known more for all of the regular folks like myself, is that it's basically a sycamore tree. It's a part of a list that is acceptable. This basically Walker's Low catmint ground cover exists in Automobile Alley already. The Nellie Stevens is a very typical kind of thing, and then planters along the street. I think that's the result or the end of the presentation, and we're happy to answer questions. And certainly myself or Andy could offer any thoughts you might have.
Do we have any questions for the applicant?
I've got a couple of questions.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Tom.
So you started off your presentation with your reference to the golden section, which I understand and think it's appropriate. on building use in an ordering system. I didn't hear how it was tied into the actual facade ordering system on the building. Where did it actually generate? Because
Where did it generate?
where does it reside?
It is the entire facade.
So the facade in totality, or is it a smaller
No,
window?
individually and in total.
Okay.
For example, the image that's on the screen right now, Cody's outlining that. That is the golden section.
And the horizontal window?
Pardon me? Yes, and that's the golden section on its side.
If the golden, I'm not, of course, without a graphic in front of me and trying to figure out, I'm not seeing how that the two can be of the exact same proportion. If one is the golden section, then the infill has to be a square to fill the balance of what the rest of the window is. I was just curious if how it results, because if the smaller window was and the larger window wasn't, then the overall would be a more predominantly the larger window, and I was just trying to figure out where the golden section starts and stops.
Well, the golden section is the masonry grid.
The grid itself.
Yes, the grid itself. And then within those, what you have is it divides up into a golden section plus a square.
The center line of the grid,
Center line.
I think we're getting into a little more detail, because what I was going to get into was that the window system in and of itself, beautiful, and I can see where your proportioning system is or kind of originates. I'm curious, how does it relate to the buildings that are around it? I realize it is looking forward.
That's a great question. Cody, go back to some of the images on Automobile Alley. What you would, I think, would find very interesting is that if you were to study the existing buildings on Automobile Alley and you looked at the windows carefully, especially the older ones, the Daily Oklahoman building and so forth, and if you were to put a scale on that and so forth, you would begin to see either as the individual window itself or as the cell of the thing begins to have proportional references. And so it's an amazing thing and a great opportunity to say that we have this in our community where these buildings were designed with that kind of thing in mind. And so, for example, the building on the left, you could begin to see the proportional breakdown of the windows themselves, the individual cells and so forth and so on. And that proportion, and I can't tell you that it's perfect on every single location, but there is a repetitive reference for this, which would be very normal for buildings of this age.
The reason why I asked the question is because the technical level of detail that was put into this building may not be available to the individual who does one on another site within Automobile Alley. And so it gets into, are we setting precedent for openness of facade and how the buildings look with respect to the adjacent historical buildings, which have greater percentages of solid space. I'm just wanting to make sure I understand how and why, so that as we go forward, we might be able to do a similar type of evaluation of buildings on adjacent property.
One of the things that we're experiencing, as you know, on Automobile Alley is the fact that there is a desire and a need for larger buildings, especially at this general intersection. The land cost is so such that you need to be able to build bigger buildings in order to make it financially feasible as far as that's concerned. Our goal with this was to be able to take inspiration from the historic references of the existing buildings and even where those references might have come from, which is the golden section, and apply that in such a way that there was respectful relationship to the historic nature of the neighborhood and yet a building that would take us forward. And so that's really what the inspiration and intention is with this architectural solution.
Okay. And I applaud, and I'm making sure that as we review and approve items, that we're looking at how it could be construed and how it might be brought back to us by others who are using this as the precedent for why they did their building a certain way.
Tony, I think that, like we all know that have been in front of this group, a solution is a solution.
Correct.
And there are infinite solutions to any one of these conditions. But based on the things that Andy wanted to accomplish, based on the scale of the building and so forth, it seemed like a really good solution to combine all of those. The building and site across the street might be a completely different approach in terms of how a building might be imagined in the Automobile Alley District.
And I think in this area, that's the unique part about this building, this site, this district. Both buildings will need to be able to be respectful to the historic structure.
That's absolutely right. This is sort of a bridge, I think, and I think you would probably agree with that. This is a bridge from downtown to Automobile Alley, and the size of this building allows a stair step, if you will. It's not reaching to 20 stories or something like that, but it reaches out to say there's a relationship to downtown.
And that's a new thing, and I think it's welcomed. I'm glad that the opportunity to build a taller building on this site has been made available in the recent past.
Right, thank you.
Well,
thank you, Andy.
I think that's great. And so I think the level and care at which we evaluate this, which is a very new aesthetic for Automobile Alley.
Yes.
This is a watershed moment because it's setting a new paradigm, it's setting a new precedent for how buildings will be done in the future. And I don't know that every site will be given the same level and care that you've done. So I want to make sure that we all have on record exactly how and why, so that when people come before, we're evaluating equally. And just two other items that I'd like to ask about. One is about the metal panel on the back side of the building. Architectural metal, but you didn't say aluminum composite. So what type of metal panel is that going to be, only for reference?
What we're really focused on that side is to create a different perspective. I mean, there's sort of a front and a back. The front, meaning the west side, is really about kind of an important statement about Broadway as an important street in our community. The back side, we really wanted to create a little bit more of a scale, a change in scale here, because we've got our courtyard and some things like that, and we felt like that an all-glass facade wasn't necessarily the right solution there. And so we were looking for a way to suggest that basically the golden section grid exists, which is consistent with the other side. We've done smaller windows in this particular instance to change the scale of it. And the metal panels are clearly there to say this is an infill. This is not, it's not glass, it's not brick, it's not any of those kinds of things. It's a lightweight infill panel is what it would be. And so that's the selection that we've made so far.
Anodized or powder coated, and if that's in the documents, I apologize.
Yes.
Which is it, one or the other?
It could be. It's likely to be an aluminum panel, and it could be powder coated. It could be, any number of ways to accomplish something that is durable and a long-term good investment.
Equivalent or in contrast to the framing of the curtain wall system?
Yes, it would be. Part of the thing that we've been thinking about with this is that, could it have a glossy surface, or maybe it's not as glossy as glass because it's an infill panel, but something that would certainly not necessarily bring a whole lot of attention to itself. It's really intended to be kind of a background element.
Okay. And the last question, and I'm speaking a little bit out of turn on this, but London Plane Tree width-wise, this building is right up on the property line as it should be, and it's tall. The London Plane Tree is a larger, normally has a little bit more scale, and what I don't know is, while some buildings, some trees, species will specifically not grow into a building, they'll hold themselves in a static spot a certain distance away. London Plane Tree?
Yes, we've discussed that very thing. Brian Doherty, everybody knows Brian, is a great landscape architect and so forth, and we've had a number of conversations with him. The idea that we've discussed is that the trees need to be managed. It's a situation where they would need to be trimmed and so forth over a period of time so that they don't damage the building or create challenging issues with that. And so that has seemed like a good solution and has seemed to have satisfied the city's requirements as we have gone to them and said, here is a proposal.
And does it have a seed pod?
Does it have a seed pod? I don't believe that the plane tree does.
Okay. I know
And that's one of the
standard
things.
sycamore does.
It's one of the things, yeah, that's exactly right, Tony. That's the difference, is that a conventional sycamore tree, if you will, has droppings, if
Has
you
the
will.
degree of litter.
And the plane tree was created to not have that.
It's a hybrid
Right.
of the sycamore and an Oriole.
Great question.
But it's a great building.
Thank you. Thanks to Andy.
Do we have any other questions from the committee?
I don't have a question. I think that there will be kind of a lot of street activity. It looks like the whole ground floor is retail, so I
Yes,
can
ma'am.
imagine how that's going to be very active. And just the amount of people in here coming out for lunch or whatever is going to create a lot of activity on the ground floor. I also think it's a very nice building and solution to the site. And I wish we could question more people on their design process to prove how their initial assumptions about what drove the project were carried through. But maybe can't do that for everybody, so, but I like the project.
It's sort of the secret, and I think your point is, why is something end up being what it is, right? And having some background is always helpful, I think.
I have a question, I think, for Laura. She's around. Oh, there you are. So on the first item, the concern regarding the entrance on the, it's on the east side. Excuse me.
Yeah, the staff report brought up the...
Can you address that?
Yeah.
Cody, can you go back to
What the concern was about that?
maybe the site plan, or do you want to see the 3D?
Yeah, this is a good
Okay.
image. The concern was, well, it's obviously designed so hundreds of employees will go through the back instead of the street. We've had some other projects on Automobile Alley who have tried to address the alley, like for delivery access, and we understand the convenience, but the alley is not the street. And so pedestrian circulation on the alley is not the intent of the guidelines. It's on the sidewalk, leave the alley for service and cars. But again, in the staff report, so that was the concern. We have guidelines, everything about the guidelines is promoting street activity. That said, I completely understand why the decision is made.
I might add one comment that we had during our discussion, and it was that had the stair in the existing parking garage, which is an integral part to the success of this project, been in a different position, then that entrance could have changed, or any number of things. It's a reference to trying to get people as conveniently as possible within the building.
Right, if the parking garage stair had been on the southwest corner of the parking garage, you would have this entrance more closer to the street, if not on the street.
What's also interesting, I think, about the use of the parking garage as it relates to this building, it doesn't mean that everybody is going to come over and go down this stair and go across to that position. Depending on where you park, if you park at the other end of the building, you're liable to go out onto Fifth Street and walk along the sidewalk and either make this a jog or actually go to the front. If there's a coffee shop, you're likely to make a detour and go to the coffee shop or something.
Okay, I don't really have a problem with that. Just wanted to make sure I understood it. I do want to ask the architects, though, again, you feel like it achieves, the exterior design achieves that blending of Automobile Alley and downtown?
I do have a couple questions, and I may jump around as I'm going through them. I'll start on the ground level. If we could go to the first floor plan. Has the amenity space been laid out or designed yet?
It's not completely defined, no.
Okay. Is the demising wall between the retail and the amenity space set, or is that?
It's not.
Okay.
I mean, at this particular time, we're obviously going through the process and so forth. This conceptual first floor plan was based on certainly Andy's knowledge of retail in downtown and those kinds of things. And the idea of making it basically 30 feet deep so it would be shallow and wide to get as much exposure on Broadway as possible was where this began. And then the same thing as it relates to the amenities. The amenities could be a workout space, it could be an early conference room, it could be a coffee thing that everybody as a staff member attends to. So this is at least our first pass on how this might go. Now, if he were to get a tenant that would take the entire floor, then things might change, and we would be coming back to you with what that recommendation might be. But for right now, we were trying to anticipate what the possibilities were.
So the 30-foot depth is actually preferred? If you could.
It's more of a placeholder until we find our tenant. We're already talking to restaurant tenants. The master tenant is actually leasing the entire building, and then we're trying to be a good downtown urban developer and put retail on the first floor. So right now, it's mainly just a placeholder until we pick who our tenants are going to be.
Great.
So 100% chance it won't look just like that when we're finished.
That's great. That's great to hear that the tenant will take priority to the space that they need, rather than setting the space and having the tenant
Absolutely.
say yay or nay.
It's designed to where we can have a lot of flexibility there.
And then if we could go to the perspective that looks south down Broadway. Yeah, if we go, I think we passed it. I'm sorry, north. That one's good right there. So I'd like to touch on two items. The first is going back to the spacing of the windows and the spacing of the mullions. And I would ask if, was it studied, was an option studied that breaks down those mullions to the next order in size, down to where rather than 8 windows per structural bay or masonry bay, that's broken down further to 12, 16, 20. And I ask in reference to some of the buildings within Automobile Alley that were referenced at the beginning of the presentation, and how the scale of the mullions and the way those windows are broken down, it seems like an opportunity to relate to those buildings by applying the same type of order or quantity of windows per masonry bay.
Right, great question. We did study that, and on a building of this scale, what you can imagine is that things get bigger generally. And as the proportion begins at a certain level, it gets larger on the same proportional scale. And the number of small windows really became what would appear to be a duplication of the buildings perhaps on Automobile Alley with the very small paned windows. And it's been our experience in doing buildings that take a historic reference and go forward, that you're not trying to replicate what's already there, you're trying to relate it. And so the proportional reference seemed like a good thing. The subdivision of the windows as it's shown right now would not have to be subdivided physically or architecturally. But we chose to do that as a proportion scale in reference to the original small paned windows of the historic buildings. And so we felt like that the size was appropriate. The grid got bigger, the proportional scale got bigger, everything needed to come up and to be in balance.
And this is curtain wall as opposed to historic storefronts, so sight lines were taken into account when you're standing inside so that you don't have a large mullion blocking your view.
Sure.
One of the things that was particularly important, Corey, was that a majority of these floors might end up being open space and open systems and so forth and so on, and you're wanting to get as much natural light into the building as you can, and the 60-foot dimension and total width was chosen for that very reason. And we've done this on a number of buildings previously, and it's a sweet spot. To be able to do that, you can literally see all the way through the building. You get natural light 30 feet into the depth and so forth. And so all of that was taken into consideration here.
And then the building as itself, as a whole, is very much a singular mass, almost a monolith on the site, or it presents itself that way, certainly from this vantage point. if you could, sorry, go back to the previous slide. There's a scale within Automobile Alley that does vary as you make your way up and down Broadway, but there is a scale that is somewhat consistent up and down Broadway, and it's somewhere in the realm of the buildings across the street from this on the other side of Broadway. Some do get larger, but there is a scale to the street, and I'm curious if there was any study made to articulate a datum within the building that references that context. You've talked about this building being a transition from Automobile Alley to downtown. The mass as itself, or even the articulation of the facade, is so consistent for the full height of the building that, to me, it feels more like a downtown building on its own. And I'm wondering if, you look down this perspective and you can see the scale of those buildings, and I'm wondering if any kind of reference to that scale was taken into consideration.
Absolutely, and in fact, part of the reason why you have a single level at the ground level and then it's 2 floors in the more vertical sections, and so it's 2, 4, 6, and 1 on the bottom, which is the 7 floors. If you were to strike a line to the datum from go up one more, from that line down Automobile Alley, there would be many buildings that would have that height, if you will. Same thing going to the next one. And so you start to see those connections as they begin to tie Automobile Alley and this building together. So that was very much a part of this, is how do you get the scale to be able to be compatible? Not trying to replicate the past, but trying to be respectful of it and citing it as a reference, a view of what the other buildings are. So that's literally taken into account here. There were early discussions about whether the entire building should be all the small grid versus the large grid, and it just didn't seem to work for a building like this. And the large grid not only gives you reference to Automobile Alley in 3 different positions, but it also gives you a reference to downtown. So this is a building in transition, moving from the Automobile Alley scale of 80 feet and so forth, all the way down to a building that's just literally across the street from this that's 15 stories.
Corey, maybe your comment is more about like the width. So like as you're walking down the street that you're passing by, 200 feet, I don't know how long this building is.
Yeah, it's 200 feet on
facade that
Broadway.
looks very similar. And although I don't have a problem with that and would move forward with this if you want, but one way to articulate it is maybe when the different tenants come in, they may have the opportunity to change their storefront a little bit or do something to make each kind of day a little bit unique. Even some of that could be done with like streetscape differences. If you felt like you were moving like across different zones as you like moved across the facade or something like that. I mean,
You're absolutely right. And what's particularly important about a building of this scale is that there are 2 things I would offer. One is that a human being at the ground level needs to have a relationship to the building in some way, and the ability to put a great restaurant here or a series of restaurants or shops, you can imagine tables and chairs and all kinds of things out on the sidewalk that would give it scale. The other thing that's particularly important is that we all know that the way wind strikes the side of a building, you think that it drives the wind up, but it drives the wind down. And the canopies along here will provide a respite from that. There'll be at least some deflection of the wind that would circulate around this building and hit it from the west side, for example, and not push it down onto those pedestrians that are at that particular level. So we felt like the scale change at the ground level could be lovely. I mean, whether it's a retail or a restaurant or any of that sort of thing, and for the average person who's walking by this to participate in that activity and that experience has been very important to Tony and to Andy in an effort to make sure that we had the right scale, something that was really a contribution to making Oklahoma City better. This is an area that has not been particularly pedestrian friendly, and because there's been significant voids through here, and this will bridge this gap, which is really terrific, and the ability to walk from Red Prime or whatever all the way up to 10th Street becomes even more pleasant because you have some things along the way.
To clarify, what I was kind of getting to is, and I know it would certainly change the concept of the building as it's presented today, but I would, approach the context in a way where at that fourth floor where there's a masonry datum in the building, I would see more of an opportunity to provide a relief in the form and actually create a roof line at that level that relates to the context of what's on Broadway at the street, and then the building above, either set back or even if it's a different articulation of material, a change at that point. I understand what's there, and as far as, you remove the horizontal datum at the second floor slab to overemphasize the horizontal datum at the third floor slab. So there's certainly a gesture to that. I was wondering if there's a place to go further with it. Do we have any other questions or comments from the committee? Is there anyone in the gallery that would like to speak to this? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Move to approve the application on the basis the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report.
That was a Ainsworth Harding motion. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Application is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6D, 400 South Robinson Avenue. Is applicant present? If you could come forward while staff presents the application.
This is the Convention Center Hotel. The committee saw a presentation on this many months ago, I think right after the first of the year in February or March. It is essentially the same, but since that was just a presentation after that point for the staff report, we really drilled down into all the regulations and guidelines. So there's a lot to be covered. It is strange that a 17-story hotel would need a variance from the height requirement. That's because the design is a podium and a tower, and the podium does not meet the height requirement. And the evaluation of it is not based on an average. So that's number one. So staff is in favor of it for reasons listed. It does need a variance. Also, the first two floors of the building along Robinson and the Boulevard are further away than 10 feet, which in early meetings with the applicant, we agreed that with such an intense use and with the porte cochere drop-off, they would need to, it's unsafe to have only 10 feet between the building and the sidewalk, or between the curb. So, but that needs a variance. Also, the loading dock off of Broadway, you can't, you have to get into your parking space or into your service drive, you need to just go in, not do a series of three-point turns to get in there. That's called maneuvering in the right-of-way, and it requires a variance. A lot of the staff report talks also about, it compares to the convention center because they're on adjacent sites and because the convention center was just approved a couple months ago. The convention center site is deeper, so they had a big service courtyard where they did their maneuvering, so they did not need a variance for maneuvering in the right-of-way. In case you're wondering, they did need a variance for the setback because everyone agreed that with so many people using the convention center, it needed deeper setbacks. So that's 3 regulations that require a variance. Staff pointed out a number of guidelines, one being that the southeast portion of the building has been reserved for building service areas, which makes a lot of sense. But because of that, it doesn't have a lot of windows. And the guideline is, 50% of the wall should be clear glass. What else? The west facade, we talked quite a bit about. It fronts the park, so it's one of the key facades of the project. The ends of the west facade, one has a coffee shop, one has a big entertainment bar. Those are pretty lively and transparent places. The center is currently programmed for a steakhouse, so it's got limited hours. It's a dark and moody kind of place. Staff questioned if there was a different concept or if just the facade design could be more transparent there. Staff also raised some questions, and I know the applicant will go through it, about the pedestrian circulation on the north side of the property, how pedestrians, because it's right next to the boulevard, how pedestrians navigate the passenger drop-off. It gets pretty complicated. We also pointed out that there's not very many street trees along Robinson. I think I know why, and yet I don't know why. It looks like there's room and that they would be needed. So with that, unless you guys have questions, I will ask the applicant to talk through all these things.
All right, great. Get the mouse here so you can drive. All right, my name is Rob Rule of RJTR Design. Good to see you guys again. It's been a little while since we were here, but I'm going to jump forward, and if you don't have any objections, what I thought I would do is walk you around the site again, like we did last time, walk through the elevations and the materiality of the site. And obviously we have been engaged with Lisa, and we understand a lot of the recommendations, and we have addressed those. And I want to just walk you through that thought process today on the design where we are. So if we want to start in the plan top left corner at the intersection of Oklahoma City Boulevard and Robinson, we'll walk in a clockwise motion. So you'll see the sidewalk there, and this is a rendered plan showing you the treatment of the streetscape with the landscaping and the proposed materiality and colors and paving that we have along the entire streetscape. You'll see that there is an area here that's generous enough for pedestrians to gather as they wait to cross the street to go to the streetcar stop station. That would be diagonally across the street from here, or to the arena. So that will be sized for that, with a backdrop of tiered landscaping of several different materials of different heights, including 3 mature trees that you see here, which would completely screen the valet drive that comes up from the below-grade parking up to the motor court area to the right here. But mostly what people will see when you could get off the streetcar, when you come from the downtown area and you arrive here, you're going to see a multi-level, very active corner. On multiple levels, 3 levels, we've got a lot of activity here, a lot of people spaces right there at the corner, and we'll look at that 3-dimensionally in a moment. Moving towards the motor court, as Lisa mentioned, we've got this sized appropriately for a hotel of this scale to have the appropriate stacking, bringing people off the street so they don't block any traffic, and do all the things that need to be done right at the front door of the hotel here. As I mentioned before, there is a valet ramp that comes up from the parking below. We have a plan in place that we're working on that will control that traffic to the point where it will be safe for pedestrians to walk along a sidewalk area that will actually take you straight to the front door, as people will move, obviously, from this corner to the front door. We propose that sidewalk will be protected with bollards along the actual curb line. There's the planter on one side that protects you from the cars, and the cars coming up from below will be controlled so that they will more likely be stopped before they can actually make the move up and make sure there's no pedestrians in the way. as they come up to do the pickup for the hotel guests. We've worked out all the accessibility slopes and the sidewalks here, and we'll talk about that because unbelievably this site does have slope to it, and we've had to deal with a lot of the sloping on the site. As we move past the front door, and obviously there's a lot of activity at the front door, a lot of transparency into the building with a lobby bar and registration desk and a lot of great activity and things happening there. The activity doesn't stop there. It transitions to a 3-meal restaurant, breakfast, lunch, dinner, being served at all times over here in the top right corner with an outdoor seating area. Once again, we would incorporate multi-tiered landscaping to protect that area a little bit visibly in noise, but also not making it too enclosed, so it really has a relationship to have that activity visible from the street. And then, of course, at the other corner, once again, the sidewalk would widen out to provide pedestrian gathering for crossing that necessarily needs to go over to the proposed parking deck across Broadway. As we move down Broadway, the landscaping continues. The streetscape adheres to the streetscape plan along this area adjacent to a bus drop-off area for when there's larger events in town. The buses would actually not have to block anything on Oklahoma City. They would be directed to pull off the Broadway and drop off here, and the hotel guests would actually enter the hotel around the corner there. As Lisa mentioned, in a hotel of this magnitude and scale, there's a lot of back-of-house and service requirements. So starting just past where the restaurant is, we start having to locate some of those back-of-house requirements in the building, including the parking access drive, which is a ramp down to the valet parking below, which you see notched into the building off of Broadway there. And then just past that, we have the loading dock area where we bring trucks while there is maneuvering on the street, which is widened with this additional widening of the lane there. It's widened. The trucks necessarily do pull back in, but once they are in, they are completely within the footprint of the building above, with the building line being here. And then as we continue further down the street, there is a myriad of exiting. You see all these stairs that have to necessarily bring the increased occupancy that we have on upper levels. Whenever you have a conference level like we have in a convention center hotel, the stairs are a huge impact. So we've got a lot of those, and we've sort of gathered them in the portion of the site that allows us to let Oklahoma City and Robinson Avenue be very, very active and not be impacted as much by the stairs. So we gathered those mostly over here. And then, of course, there's some back-of-house mechanical and electrical considerations that necessarily have to be on the street for service, including the transformers, which have to have street access back here on this corner. As we move around on 4th Street, we have a secondary bus drop-off zone, which would be immediately adjacent from the convention center. So there's sort of a dual purpose for that, but this becomes a backup just in case there is a lot of traffic on one. We didn't want traffic to back up, so we actually provided a secondary location because there is a secondary entrance into the hotel at this location here. In fact, this entire first half of the block on 4th from Robinson back to that bus drop-off it feels like a hotel entry. It's very active. There's a coffee shop at the corner with outdoor cafe dining seating. There's a retail component as well facing that area and some additional landscaping at that zone. So that would be an area that feels like it's the front door of the hotel, although a second front door directly across from the convention center across the street. Then as we progress around the corner to Robinson Avenue directly across from the park, you'll notice here, and this is where we heard Lisa about the restaurant that is in the middle of the site. This is where the restaurant that she talked about is right here. At the corner is the coffee shop with outdoor cafe dining that goes about up to this point right here. And we have a lot of cafe tables and seating areas, and we do make up some grade there because there is about a 2 feet transition from one side of the site to the other. So we've got some planter areas and steps up into the site and some ramping areas for all the accessibility issues are handled, but we have some tiered things happening there. But a lot of outdoor activity promoted by this terrace, if you will, outside the balcony. And we've overlapped a portion of the restaurant with that activity that will come off the coffee shop. There is an entry into the restaurant at this location right here with a placemaking and branding component. And we'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But there's a sculptural quality to the branding of that restaurant, the current restaurant that we're planning for this spot right there now. But then from that point upwards, we have this component that was there before, but we've expanded it, and we didn't really go over it last time, but there is an outdoor restaurant here. And we didn't talk about that last time, but essentially this is an outdoor restaurant. All in front of the indoor restaurant, we have an outdoor restaurant that we're calling the Burger Bar. And right here is the interface for that outdoor restaurant. The idea is that it almost has that sort of park feel where it's a roll-up window in a shop front that is right across the park. People can come over, grab a burger, grab a drink, and they can sit in this area under shade, under cover. The building does overhang this area. If you recall, there's a loggia, if you will, with columns and so forth here. There would be a very graphic, welcoming component to that, very active to this whole entire seating area here with the Burger Bar interface there. We do have a couple of stairs. Once again, you can't put all the stairs in one corner, so we have a couple just in this one corner, but we minimize that as the transition to the larger area here for outdoor dining where we have planned a multi-venue sports bar, which has capabilities for indoor concerts and so forth, with lots of glass and openness, and then there's a mezzanine terrace above that area as well. Just real briefly, this shows you the diagram of the underground parking. There's the access to going below off of Broadway, and then the valet entrance back up to Oklahoma City Boulevard. This sort of is an elaboration. I don't think we need to get into it, but basically what I just talked to you about with all the indoor components of the hotel. On the first floor, there is a mezzanine at the sports bar at the corner, so there's actually a balcony terrace, so there's 2 levels of actually outdoor seating right there on the corner, which we think is pretty special, incredible. And then at the actual full second floor of the hotel, which has the grand ballroom you see here in white. There's a junior ballroom also over here. All the back-of-house components are tucked into the bottom right-hand corner. Everything else sort of opens up with meeting rooms with windows out to the street on all 3 of those sides right there, or the pre-function space, which is the beige color, has daylight awareness with openings towards downtown, towards the convention center along this whole facade, in the arrival from the escalators and elevators, all looking towards the arena that way. But most significantly, and we feel really excited about this, is this white area here is an outdoor terrace. It's fully covered, but it's an outdoor terrace that opens up to the park that really is going to bring the presence of the park into the project. We're really trying to create this enhancement. We talked about this last time, how we really want this hotel to feel like it's a part of the park by creating a 3-level amenity space, not only with the ground level I just showed you, but also this upper-level multi-venue terrace that could host weddings, festivals, concerts, all sorts of events could happen on this outdoor covered terrace here. And then the third experience, if you will, on that stacked level of amenities would be the roof of that amenity podium that has an outdoor pool, complete with cabanas, a multifunction lawn. I could see lots of events happening here, and that would all be served by a bar, a hotel lobby, a hotel pool bar that is undercover as well, but open to the street below. So there's a lot of presence, a lot of visible and connectivity between people on the street and this space, and vice versa, as well as being very open to the park. And some of the landscaping here, visually tying into the park across the street, and the proximity of the park is going to make you feel like you're in a pool enjoying this space in the park. Is the idea, as you're kind of elevated a little bit, separated from the street. And then jumping ahead past the floor plans of the guest rooms, which we can go back to if you want to, but this is the hotel facade facing downtown, right on Oklahoma City Boulevard. So we've at the corner where we started, we have the sports bar and loggia and elements that you can see there. And then the beginning of there's a conference room right there at the corner, but just past that is the open area we'll talk about in a moment. But moving on Oklahoma City Boulevard, we have a large viewing window of downtown from that pre-function space I showed you. We have a large area of glass here where the motor court is with a large canopy. Over that, awareness of the lobby bar, the registration, and then moving on into the 3 Mill restaurant along the street all the way to the end of the building. All of that would be surrounded by multiple finishes of brick tones that we have chosen very carefully related to the context of Bricktown and some of the adjacent areas, going up to that podium height, if you will. That would have some punched openings of different character, smaller openings that relate to some of the context in this area. And then, of course, that language changes with a transition zone at the amenity level where the pool terrace is, and then turns into a more vertical arrangement of materials that ranges from architectural precast with colors that relate to the brick below, with punched openings within that, and then some areas, particularly at the elevator lobby central part of the building where it goes vertical, we've accentuated that with a vertical run of glass, a curtain wall, that comes across the top of the building, screening the mechanical equipment on the roof, providing opportunities for lighting and signage, and then coming back down with glass at the corner to provide this vertical glass element we'll see in just a moment in 3 dimensions. As we move around onto Broadway, from that corner where the 3 Mill restaurant, and you can see the Motor Court, Porte Cochere beyond, the restaurant is right here with outdoor dining and seating, and then as it moves back, you'll see on the upper level, you'll see the windows that are punched openings in the facade there for the meeting rooms that are located in that area, and below that are the elements for the valet parking entry and the service entries at that area. And then, of course, at the corner, we have the 2-level space that's required for all of the mechanical functions of the podium located in this corner here. Coincidentally, all those, as we move around the corner, you can see that again here. Coincidentally, that area is right across the street from a very similar scaled and detailed component that is there for the convention center. That's exactly where they chose, and makes a lot of sense on the site. In that corner, that's where the mechanical spaces will be for the convention center, and so we have that same location across from the deck and that location. And then we have more back of house space, which I showed you in plan, that sort of goes up to about mid-block, and that's where we have the necessary entries for the power company to get to the transformers and so forth, and other back of house entries into and exiting of the tower. But as soon as we can, about right here, we transition back to the sort of the language of materials that we're using on the rest of the block, and reintroducing the brick, reintroducing the metal framed glass components, contrasting brick components, metal column covers, and so forth. This would become the central or the second entry into the hotel that I mentioned in plan, with the bus drop-off right outside of that. And then coming around the corner, you'd have the coffee shop anchoring the corner with some outdoor dining there, which then picks up right here on the right-hand side, which is the southern end of Robinson. So there'll be some outdoor dining at the cafe that wraps around, all the way around here. There'll be an outdoor fireplace. And then, of course, the entry and the branding component for the restaurant inside happens here in mid-block. And then we pick up the experience of the burger bar, with the burger bar window happening here, with all its seating stretching all along the facade that you see there. All of that has the open terrace for the convention space up above that, and conference space above it. And then above that, it's topped with the garden space for the pool terrace. And then, of course, over here we have the pool bar, which is under cover of the building, set up on pilotis here, with some meeting space below that, and then the 2-tiered outdoor space for the sports bar back there at the corner. So looking at that in 3 dimensions, it largely looks like what we showed you last time. We've enhanced the detailing of the landscaping along the street and the activity all along Oklahoma City Boulevard. The idea is that we've sort of engaged the street on multiple levels. You know, from the 3rd level, there's people activity up here, all along the garden pool terrace, inside the conference level. These meeting rooms right here, particularly in the evening when those rooms are lit, I mean, that's going to be a little beacon of light right above 2 stories of the sports bar and activity. You can see some of the landscaping and screening that happens at the corner, the arrival point. This is sort of the view from the streetcar arrival as you walk across the street to get to the hotel. And we have also engaged with the convention center architects to show that in context. You can sort of see the language and the rhythm and scale of all these components going down the street and their relationship to the park. I think this is a really good view, showing sort of the activity along the street, both from a pedestrian along the street, walking along these intermittent planted areas that we have, and then a secondary row of planting material that has that makes up some of the grade transitions I talked about, with entries that go right into the coffee shop, for instance, here, into the restaurant here, the burger bar seating and the burger bar window, and then the sports bar activity there. And then you can see all the other activity above that. So this idea of having this sort of multi-level active space, I think it's pretty exciting that it really feels engaged with the park across the street. And then just another view of that, just looking at it from multiple angles and maybe a little higher so you can sort of see the activity on the different levels there. And then we've got other views around the site, and we can come back to any of those, but I thought maybe it'd be a good time to open up for questions. I've put a lot in front of you all at once.
So if I go to the site plan on Oklahoma City Boulevard,
Sir.
and you have a portico share drop-off, you've got a valet exit where the valet staff is going to be bringing cars up for somebody who had it parked below.
Right.
And then you have a sidewalk that's coming from the west.
Yes.
And at all those points where they intersect, the sidewalk appears to narrow.
It does narrow a little bit more there than we intend, that we're going to make that a normal sidewalk width at that point.
Okay. Yeah. And so you've got bollards.
Yes.
So you got portico share drop-off, curb space, bollard.
Curb and bollard.
Of width, and then a certain width of sidewalk, and then a zone of landscaping. I'm just kind of curious how that is all going to come together, and I'm thinking about individuals who they've run over to play in the park a little bit, and this is the way they choose to come back because that's the door they left, even though there's other doors on this side.
Yep.
So they're going to come back to the door, then they've got a stroller and a person, and it seems like that is even more congested than a standard sidewalk width. So I'm not quite sure what that width should be from a pedestrian safety standpoint, but in that location, it seems to be tighter than you intend. On the east side, it's a similar situation, but it seems to have less of a pedestrian loaded activity. It still seems too narrow, but you don't have the individuals who will be bringing up from the valet below grade.
Right.
And you don't have the park component of individuals who are coming from the park. So that's one spot where
Yes.
I think that it needs to be, I feel it needs to have a little bit more study.
And we agree.
Tony, if I could jump in, I actually think the east side holds probably not as much, but it does hold equal value, knowing that there is a drop-off zone on Broadway, that there will be a good amount of circulation from the east side, and actually in large groups if they're coming off a bus.
I think that both sides need to be wider than standard.
Yes.
Wider than code minimum, wider than, I think it needs to be thought out with respect to, at some point in time, some event is going to release, that many people are going to exit the front. And then at the same time, those people are going to be asking for their car to come back, and so there just seems to be a whole lot of things in both of those areas. Yeah, I was focusing a little more on the west, but yeah, both would need.
I share Tony's concern, and also the allocation of the circulation right up against Broadway as you're crossing the drive aisle for the drop-off. And it looks from the plan right now that there is potentially some room to prioritize the sidewalk, both the width and its location, compared to the landscaping that's in place. Especially around the valet exit, I understand the need for it and would want it there completely, but there does look to be some room to negotiate with that.
We agree. We're going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't have it shown here. I apologize for that. That's the plan. There is room there to do that.
As you do, take into account tactile surfacing, some degree of ADA. It appears to have two lines as a curb, so I'm thinking about the stroller now.
Right.
Some degree of navigation with an individual who's got more than one mode of operation. And then also, if you could show it kind of enlarged to show curb space, bollard, amenities, all of those things, that would be helpful.
Right.
Yep. Oh, sorry.
Hello, my name is Leah Campbell. I'm with Kimley Horn. I'm the landscape architect. And in terms of looking at that entrance and that space, the reason that it has been narrowed down to start with is because that's not actually our ADA route. And so in terms of putting in the tactile surfacing and whatnot, while we agree we want to definitely have a safe place for them to walk through, and that's why when you originally saw it, there wasn't space for them at all, because we were thinking, we want to prohibit them to come through there, because that ramp, walking that way, not the ramp, but the slope is over 6% at this point, and so we didn't have a space at all. But then that, in that sense, it means, okay, well, then you have to actually walk in the road, and so we didn't want that as well. So we went ahead and made the 3-foot space at this point. And then just the last conversations we've had, exactly what you said, we're going to go ahead and widen it, but it will not be an actual ADA accessible route.
Okay. If it's not an accessible route, are you intending to make the cross slope greater than 2%? Because I'm thinking about water, cars, vehicles, people, and all of that coming together, and now if it's got a cross slope greater than what somebody is used to, that could just add another variable for a complex.
It's definitely a complicated grading issue, and we're going to make it as safe as we can make it, but we're not going to want to bring people there on purpose.
We're not promoting it as the accessible.
Absolutely, because the accessible route is going to be coming around on the east side.
I'm just thinking about safety of all those cars, people, everything at the same point. I think that's something that you're going to develop. It's going to come back. We're not going to resolve it today, so I just wanted to make note of it.
While we've got you, could you speak to the quantity of trees on Robinson? Staff made a comment about the quantity, and I share the opinion of wanting to see more trees along the sidewalk there.
No, I understand. Yeah, so what we have done, and you can see that we actually have larger planting area than what is proposed throughout in most of the areas and most of the downtown. So instead of having a 10 by 5 area for the plantings, we actually have a 30-foot by 5-foot planting area. And so this way, the trees that we have actually selected to place, and we have very strategically placed these trees in terms of the sculpture and in terms of the amenities and having the multiple phasing or multiple levels of the interaction, we wanted to make sure that they really were being able to interact with the park and with the streetscape. And I mean, as a landscape architect, I love trees, but we don't want to hide that. We want to showcase and bring the people to the streetscape element. And so we put these in the areas that we did with larger bases, so hopefully those trees will actually grow larger and bigger than they would anyways, but in the strategic places where you're not going to block a lot of the views in and out and the interconnectivity.
Yeah, so maybe even to be more specific than that, if you look at the plan, the way the trees are spaced right now, the zone between these two trees, where it seems like, hey, maybe there's a tree missing, right? The zone between those trees is precisely where that large second floor space is, the outdoor space, and enhancing the view to the park from that space, the connectivity visually to the park, could be interfered with by a tree, because the canopy of a tree right there would be right in front of that and diminish that view. Also, right above there is the pool terrace and the garden on the third floor. The same exact thing sort of happens here. You say, well, why isn't there a tree right there? We have the terrace, if you will, that has the balcony right above it at the sports bar. If the street tree right there would necessarily block that. So we understand the street tree composition on the street and the rhythm and all this. Love all that stuff. But we thought that this might be an artful way to compose it with some trees that have some significance with the way that Leah's planned the beds, the planting beds, so they are healthy, vigorous trees here that frame the architecture and its relationship to the park, acknowledging that right across the street there's a huge amount of trees. And then I know precedence is sort of a tricky situation, but just south of here on the approved plans for the convention center, that block is twice as long as ours. Okay, so ours is 300 feet, theirs is 600 feet. The lower half of that block, they did the same thing. If you recall, during that process, there's only 5 trees on the lower half of in the same exact spacing we have. There's only 5 trees because they composed it based on how the building needed to, or they wanted to relate it to the street. So we thought, okay, well, that makes sense, so we chose to do that here as well as our proposal.
I understand the desire to not obstruct views and to highlight the architecture. I think shading is going to play a major factor as well, and even more unique to your project because of how much outdoor seating and street activity there is, and really to make those spaces pleasant in the Oklahoma summer, shading would be a great way to accomplish that. I think as you make your way by this building, either by car or by foot, there will be vantage points to experience the building and experience the park back and forth. I think there's, many, many examples of tighter spacing of trees where you still get to experience both sides in an urban setting. So I still share, staff's concern about how few trees there are, and really see that as an opportunity to shade the activity that's on the street level.
I think one of the things that might come into play as well on this conversation, especially on the west facade, is you're choosing trident maples. Trident maples, medium-sized tree. If you were to have a canopy type of situation, it would be a pretty low canopy, and it wouldn't be getting up high enough that it's going to cast a whole lot of shade. London plane tree is a larger tree. There's a lot of larger trees that can be a more shading element. And then, river birch that you're using on the south side, that's a larger tree. The ones that now that you're going to the north side, and you're going to what I believe is more of a very large shrub or a smaller tree in scale.
It's a small ornamental tree on the north.
Small ornamental tree. So not only are the trees maybe few in quantity, but in general they're relatively small in stature.
And we did that on purpose. If you look at the actual width that we have between the tree and the building, along Robinson we have 11 feet of the pedestrian space. So we don't want the canopy of the trees, very similar to what they talked about earlier, we don't want the canopy of the trees to impede into the building, especially in the instance that we're going to have all of the openness and the activity up there. And we wanted that more upright tree canopy as opposed to one that's going to more hang over and have more issues with maintenance and pruning and whatnot.
Okay. I think that the trident can get relatively wide. It can have some width, but its height and its canopy would still be very small, and its footprint would be.
It'll be a very much more standard, regular-sized tree as opposed to the canopy coming over. So the height can still grow to a pretty good-sized, 40-foot tree, and again, that's why we gave it a larger spacing. Because in a typical downtown 10-foot, it's not going to grow very much. But in the 30-foot spacing, we would hope that it's really going to grow taller, more like it would in nature.
Okay.
If the tree that's there has more of a vertical profile to it, and the bed is 3 times as long as a typical bed, is there an opportunity to have 2 of those in each bed? So you're keeping your spacing, you're keeping your view angles, but what's there right now, simply having 2 per bed instead of 1?
It just kind of detracts from the overall having the one larger root system area for that one tree. Because if you look at a tree canopy, the root system of a tree canopy goes out to the extent of the canopy, and beyond. And so you want to have, ideally, as much room as you can for that tree's roots to extend throughout. And so that's why you're putting in 2 trees, then they're going to be competing for that same space and competing for the water and whatnot. So the larger areas for one tree was intended for that tree to do as best as it could do and grow as large as it could and healthy as it could.
And I get the shading thing. I love that. I'm all for streetscape trees. But I just want to make sure that everybody understood that 80% of that, 90% of that sidewalk level seating area is covered, right? And it's covered. So and there's only 11 feet from there to where the street trees are. So and this is also on the west side. So what we're talking about from a shading standpoint is that afternoon sun. There's sort of a range in the mid-afternoon to late afternoon. Once it gets to late afternoon, the park's going to be a lot of shading. But there's only a small window where that bearing sun is going to be shaded by street trees, I think.
Well, from what I know about shading is that typically you want vertical elements on west facades to obscure that low sun angle, right, and that horizontal canopies are more effective on the south facade.
Right.
So looking at the west facade here, I think the canopies will play a role, but once you get into that kind of summer, 5 p.m., right at dinner time, that sun's going to be higher and further north, but lower. And really, I think the trees are an opportunity to maybe keep them at a scale that creates a vertical shading element along that doesn't go high enough to where you're obscuring the view from the second floor multi-purpose space, but using the trees as those vertical elements on the west side to really that dinner time in the summer is when you want people sitting there, but if they're going to roast, they're not going to go. So, something to consider.
Right.
Yeah, as we study the north elevation and the location of that planter bed, I'd actually like to have a little more discussion about the plantings along the west side. That you make a very valid point that with the location of your current canopy, you do not want a tree that's going to basically put shade onto the top of the canopy. That serves no purpose, and that's not the intent. But you also don't want a tree that's so small that its natural point of its canopy is going to be too low for people to enjoy walking through or along that facade. So I think it needs to be really in that sweet spot. And I do think that if you get the tree to the scale that it's not going to get into the canopy and you get it to where you can get in that, or it's not going to get into your constructed canopy, but that your canopy could be high, in tree canopy, prune tree canopy is high enough, that you might find one that does work for more, that would create a rhythm and a west kind of vertical shading that the tree provides. I think that there's probably something that could be studied there as well. And I'd love for our landscape architect to be sitting whenever we have that discussion, because she's going to bring a whole another level of knowledge to this discussion.
I am a little bit concerned about the blank facades facing Broadway and the large kind of blank facade facing 4th Street. My concern is that it's going to encourage Broadway to just sort of be a dead street. I don't know, do we have a lot of background on like how that street is going to be developed in the future, or?
We have some background. The site immediately east is going to be a parking garage, like a 600-space parking garage that has a wrap of, there was a news story earlier in the week, people might have seen it. It's going to be wrapped with housing and retail. Okay. So, but those were the proposals, and that hasn't been finalized, but there should be some activity, in my opinion, down 4th Street. If you continue across Gaylord, there'll be future development on the Producers Co-op site. We've seen some initial concepts. It's mixed use of various kinds. And then there's a new hotel going up on 5th and Gaylord. So, to your point, I expect that there would, part of why you have a grid and streetscapes is because for these high-intensity uses, you have people walking from all directions for a variety of reasons at a variety of times.
Right, that new hotel that's under construction right now, its main entrance is actually at 4th and EK Gaylord at the corner. So you could anticipate there will be activity in that area, and south of 4th Street, Broadway will be relocated literally half a block to the east. So this block, there'll be like one block of Broadway where they're going to have their entrance and everything for trash trucks and dropping things off, and it will go to 4th Street, and at that point, it's going to end right there and will be relocated. So there'll be kind of a change at that intersection.
Yeah, I think that there are some large hotels in probably bigger cities in Oklahoma City that don't have these kinds of blank facades. I don't know what their entire maintenance plan is to achieve that. So I'm wondering if it's not possible to add windows? I mean, I don't know if any of the staff areas could be along those facades, and there might be light then going to those staff areas, so that, because that's maybe some rooms that might enjoy some light, or if there's a way to make this facade sort of more dynamic with some other types of art features or something.
So you're talking primarily about this part of Fourth, right?
Yeah, and also just facing Broadway, that we'll just have like this giant blank.
But I guess there are windows on Broadway here.
Okay, well, if you were walking.
Oh, yeah, on the street level, yeah. Yeah, gosh.
And I mean, I understand how you have all this
Yeah.
service here and that it's necessary. I just,
Yeah, go ahead.
Brett Sommerly with Omni Hotels. The question is, as far as 4th Street goes, just to give you a couple of background, can you flip to the actual floor plan? I just want to walk through it real quick so you guys kind of see what we've seen as well. Go to the actual floor plan. You go. So, starting on the east side, obviously you've got the 3-meal restaurant up in this corner here, and then as you come down, this actually starts where the laundry is. The reason you have to place laundry here is because the equipment itself, it becomes non-usable after about 20, 25 years. You have to pull that out of the building. That's really heavy equipment. That's the reason why it street fronts this street. So it's very important that that's there. Obviously, as you come down, there's not much you can do here. Loading dock has to be somewhere, so this is kind of the least of all evils. As we saw, we wanted to activate, again, the north side and west side of the buildings. And then as you come the corner, again, electrical equipment, there's nothing, you can't get around that. It has to be there. We've already had conversations with the utility companies. And again, all of this is all your stairs. Can we open the stair up? Sure. With glass? Absolutely. But you're showcasing the back out stair that'll get used very rarely. So there's not much opportunity. We've explored that. We understand your concern. We've had similar concerns voiced when we developed our Omni Louisville project. Again, I think the reality of what they saw was, hey, you guys are doing as much as you can to activate this street, and I think we've tried that. We can always work with you guys on trying to find some, whether it's artwork or some kind of change in elevation here, but to introduce windows, I think, would not be the right thing for this hotel on either side of the street that we've talked about.
I agree with the vantage point that maybe that windows, we talk about windows often because of the relationship it creates from the streetscape into the building, but given the uses that are in the building at this corner, looking into the loading dock is just as appealing as looking at a concrete wall, in my opinion.
The other thing I want to mention too, and I didn't mention on this, but if there's 600 rooms in this hotel, there'll be 500 employee service in this too. So there's as many staff as there will be guests. So there's a tremendous amount of back of house space ratio compared to most uses that you guys are used to probably looking at as well.
So the point I was getting to is, in my opinion, I would talk about it less in terms of windows and more just in terms of something to kind of study those facades in a way from the pedestrian experience and what that means, especially on 4th, standing against a 25-foot tall concrete wall. Is there a way to break that down in scale? Is there a way to, place something at the pedestrian scale? I know that it looks like there are landscaping elements along 4th. Am I correct in saying that go back probably 3/4 of the way?
Right.
So, as you come around that back corner, are there ways to add interest that maybe detract you from the building facade itself as well?
The other thing I do want to mention, some of that facade has to have louvers, so we'll have to work through that, but I think we're willing to look at different facades. I mean, in Louisville, we put some, we call, I'm trying to remember the word, but there's basically window boxes for advertisement. I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost if that's not something you guys are into, but we're going to work with staff on trying to figure out what that facade may do. But again, it's going to be difficult. The laundry has louvers, the electrical has louvers. again, the pull into the loading dock is going to be, say, open, but, even when it's closed, it's a garage door. So it's going to be difficult, but we'll work with whatever you guys
I think that the introduction of the louvers into the elevation is actually going to help it from the kind of stark component that it currently shows. So I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that'll be an enhancement. Some kind of materiality and differentiation of material. I would be happy with adding that to the list of the things that would be going to coordinate with staff and maybe just confirm with us whenever you come back on a couple of these other items.
Right. Well, just so we understand, I mean, what we're showing right now is at the corner, we're showing, this is actually a composition of louvers and framing around where we need that for the mechanical systems. So we have that at the corner there, and then we have a wall here that has a lot of the access doors for exiting and so forth, with a wall that is actually detailed very similar to what's happening across the street, the convention center. In fact, their wall's almost identical. It's the same scale, same height. It has reveals in it just like this is. So we sort of responded to what's happening on both sides of the street there. And then, of course, there's the double row of landscaping going across the street, which is actually deeper on the other side. They have the room to do that. They pulled it off. We didn't have that room, unfortunately. They did, and they've got even more landscaping. So some of this facade is going to be screened somewhat by landscaping, because a lot of people will be walking on the other side of the street as well. But this largely responded to what's going across the street. And then on the next elevation, you can see that we turned the corner with the louvers here. We've got louvers where the laundry room is that Brett spoke of. We've got windows on the second floor. We have color and material change on the facade. We've got 3 different material changes in the facade right now as an effort to try to break it down already. Acknowledging that you won't have any long-distance views of this facade. You never see the facade all in place. It's all about the streetscape. I understand that.
Do we have any other comments or questions from the committee? Would anyone in the gallery like to speak to this? I think this is a wonderful project, and I probably said it the last time you guys presented too. I think it's going to be a great addition to the city, and it's going to be that connection between Chesapeake Arena and the Convention Center. I think that whole corner of the park is going to be really great. We really appreciate you guys coming in last time and giving a presentation ahead of time. We really encourage that and appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. I think there's been some items that have been discussed today. They somewhat correspond to some of the conditions that staff has listed in their recommendation, just to make everyone aware of that. And I'll open it up one last time if anybody wants to discuss anything else.
The only thing I didn't see, maybe I'm not reading it right, but we raised the concern about, is there enough pedestrian clearance on that kind of northwest face? In the staff recommendation, there's item D that says clear identifiable path, but we might flesh that out a little bit more just to clarify that we want to have more clearance in those, in both the northwest and the northeast, actually.
So staff's recommendation is specific to that valet exit, but you're saying that the discussion really revolved around that whole north side.
Right, and it says identifiable, which I might expand that to say, larger, right, more clearance and not just visually identifiable.
Yeah, what I wrote down is what the committee wanted to see studied further was the whole north side streetscape and clearances. The west side, in terms of size, spacing, and species of planting. And then the third one was to look at some way to further break down the scale and add more visual interest to the east side.
East and south.
East and south side.
Well, that's kind of captured in item B there, but yeah, that was.
Does anyone want to take a crack at this?
Can I make one comment real quick?
Yes, please.
We just flipped, we had actually put this exhibit together just so that you could see where we were saying were the accessible routes, which do meet ADA. And so you can see on the north side, we do have a clear designated path, and this will be designated with the pavers and the materials that we're using. So that will definitely be worked where you're going to be able to clearly go to the front door from this route. And again, on the west side, it can't be ADA, but we will absolutely make that wider so that you can get through. But this shows, for the majority of the part of the north side, it is very accessible.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Actually, if I could, I just want to review with the applicant. I think you're aware of the items that have been discussed. Are you comfortable revisiting some of those items?
You're referencing the trees,
So the north side, I'll just say in general circulation, the west side, trees, and then the east and south facades. I just want to make sure that you guys are comfortable if a motion is made that includes conditions where that stuff would need to be reviewed by staff in a follow-up.
Yes, and under the assumption that on the northwest side, obviously we're limited somewhat by what we can do, but obviously we'll work with you guys to work on that. Again, just to reference that again, we're trying to avoid that interaction with the car, so we really narrowed it down to kind of prevent people, but the more we talked about it, that's the natural path people are going to take, so we want to widen that now. We're not going to celebrate. We're definitely going to give the opportunity for people to walk that and use that. So under that context, as long as, we're not having to introduce ramps or anything like that for ADA, absolutely. So, yep.
Great.
I move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant receives a variance from the Board of Adjustments from the regulations for maximum building height, maximum building setback, and the prohibition against maneuvering or parking or maneuvering in the public right-of-way.
Hey, Tony, let me stop you there. I believe you stated a variance from the maximum building height, and they actually need a variance from the minimum building height.
All right, thank you. I'm going to start over. I move to approve the application as referenced in the staff recommendation, with the conditions that the applicant receive a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the regulations for the minimum building height, maximum building setback, and the prohibition against maneuvering or parking or maneuvering in the public right-of-way. And that the application, and that the applicant gets a little more, does a little more study and detail on the east and the south ground floor facades, to be reviewed with staff and to be brought back to us for approval. That the design and program of the center portion of the ground floor of the west facade be studied to add more activity and window transparency. Really, the entire south, or the entire west face be studied with respect to landscaping. I guess that's what we landed on. Landscaping and density of trees and type and species of trees. That the applicant review the entire north facade, pedestrian and vehicular zone from the entire north facade along Oklahoma City Boulevard. And that's it.
Okay, that was a Blatt Ainsworth motion. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? So the first motion passes.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustments for variances from the regulations for minimum building height, maximum building setback, and the prohibition against parking or maneuvering in the public right-of-way.
That was Blatt Ainsworth again. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Application is approved. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you guys working with us.
Thanks
very
a lot.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leah,
Okay, that concludes items for individual consideration. We do have some other business on the docket. We will be electing chairs and vice chair for the committee for the next annual term. I believe we'll move forward with this with... Yeah.
I'll make one comment that I didn't make at the top, but Tony mentioned it a minute ago. Connie has actually resigned. Her term was expiring, and she has another commitment that happens at this same time that she wanted to fully commit to. So she has formally resigned. I have submitted proposed replacements. Those have not been appointed yet, and I don't know exactly when they will be. So do not nominate Connie for any office. I have submitted potential replacements for Chuck, and I have not heard back on their decision.
On Connie's seat, is it specific to a landscape architect?
Connie's seat is a design professional slot, so I have submitted another landscape architect and an architect. I do believe that landscape architect is extremely helpful to almost all the committees, but it could be an engineer, it could be architect, it could be lots of, as long as they're licensed.
So I believe we will be voting for chair and vice chair by format of nomination and then a vote. The staff encourages that the chair and vice chair seat rotate. I think I agree there's benefit to rotating it and getting everybody a chance to do it. If you are interested to do it, you're welcome to let the rest of the committee know that you're interested in hopes of receiving a nomination. And I think I'll leave it at that.
I'm going to motion that Nathan move forward to the chair's position specifically due to the fact of his knowledge of the past. I mean, we've got a lot of new individuals, and I think that he can carry on some of the knowledge that we don't currently possess. So if no exception, I'd like to at least nominate you for the chair's position. I should have asked first.
Second.
It's saying something when, I think I'm still relatively new, like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. We've had new faces, but luckily we have great staff to help keep us straight.
Okay. Well, are there other can we make other nominations, or? Yeah?
I believe so.
Oh. I would like, I think, Nathan has been great. I've obviously not been here that long, but I would also like to nominate Corey if he's interested in doing it again, because I think he's been a very good leader in the discussion. So, I don't know, Corey, are you interested in doing it again? Are you nominated?
I would do it again if it came down to it, but I would certainly, if Nathaniel's open to it.
I actually prefer him doing it too, for what it matters. So we didn't coordinate any of this.
No, we didn't.
Yeah. I don't know. The idea of rotating obviously is a good idea, but you've also only been doing it for. Is it typically a year, or did we kind of get off?
We
got off
re-elect
cycle?
every year. We did sometime in the past year. We've tried to streamline, and then sometimes, like let's say that often what has happened is, let's say today we only had 4 members present. Sometimes the committee's uncomfortable with taking a vote until everybody is here, so it gets pushed to the next month. So that's why it gets off cycle sometimes. Oftentimes, actually.
I would be open to taking a year off.
Okay, well, that sounds like yours. I mean, a little bit, so that's the answer to that.
I would do it if nobody else wanted to do it, but if you're willing,
prefer not to. What do you want to do?
Yeah, again, I prefer not to, but you also have your, you're also a person with individual free will. So,
All right, guys, I'm getting hungry. Let's go.
yeah.
There is a motion on the floor.
There is. So there's a motion. There is a second. It's a Black Kriegel motion. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? So Nathaniel, you are chair.
Yeah, we can say it's just dead. I didn't know if we were like nominating different people, and I thought Courtney has been doing
How
a
does
good
that-
job, so I...
Are the nominations motions, or do you make nominations and then someone makes a motion? or-
Most of the time in the committee, there's discussion, and then somebody will make a motion out of that. But we'll take care of it. You don't need to.
All right, so then I move that we elect Tony as vice chair.
Second.
I will second. Yeah.
I've asked his approval ahead of time.
Okay, so that was a Kriegel-Bates motion. Am I allowed to do that? Okay. Yeah, that's true, right? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So Tony, you are the vice chair. Moving on to communications and comments from staff. Anything?
We
to
have a
talk
meeting
about?
next month.
Okay.
Put it on your calendar.
It-
Always.
It is June 21st. June 21st.
My birthday.
Is it really? It's my mother's birthday.
Okay, well, here, let's show of hands. Who will be here on June 21st? Who? Okay, we'll send an email out. Okay, well, we'll send an email. If we don't, we'll need to schedule another day.
Okay. Do we have any other comments from the committee? Anybody else? Okay, the next meeting is Thursday, June 21st. New applications to be submitted to staff by Tuesday, May 15th. Revisions and informations on continued projects to be submitted May 22nd. Meeting adjourned.